Shalom everyone. This session we're going to talk about the oral law. So what do you mean by that? Well, we have the written law, the Torah, and the books of the prophets and the writings. But what we have in terms of the oral law is what we now call the Mishnah and the Talmud. These are texts that originally were transmitted orally. They would be taught from teacher to student, and around the 1st century, there began a movement to codify, to put everything down into writing. This was an immense project and really didn't conclude until around the year 730, 750, somewhere in that time period, where this great work of the oral law was completed. So we call it the Mishnah. There are 6 orders of the Mishnah. There are 72 little folios, or tractates as we call them, of the Talmud. The Talmud consists of the Mishnah, the Gemorrah, which is the commentary, and if you would, it's the majority and minority opinions and questions that are presented throughout, and then also something called Midrash. Midrash is the sort of the story behind the story. Most of the Midrashim are factual. Some are not, but they are all true. In other words, these stories that go behind the story were sometimes told to illustrate a lesson. So that's why they're all true. They contain truths, although not all of them are factual, which is why you need a teacher to learn Mishnah and Talmud. So what areas are we talking about in terms of the Mishnah and the Talmud? Literally everything that is contained in the Torah is in the Mishnah. If I could use this analogy, and there's a big difference between the Talmud and a newspaper, but picture a newspaper and you have all the headlines. That's the Torah. That's the 5 books of Moses. That's the headlines. The Mishnah and the Talmud are the rest of the articles. And this teaches us how to do the law. One of the examples I like to use is that the Torah tells us that the penalty for not observing the Sabbath is a death penalty. Okay? Well, okay, we can understand that. There's actually an incident in Scripture, in the Torah, that talks about this man who was out gathering sticks on the Sabbath, which is one of the prohibited works. You're not allowed to gather things in like that. And he was punished with death by stoning. So, how do we know that he did something wrong by doing that? So, if we understand that the death penalty is invoked for violation of the Sabbath, we need to have a pretty good idea of what those violations entail. So in the Scripture, in Torah, it says you should restrain your foot on the Sabbath. It says that, word for word, you should restrain your foot on the Sabbath. So what does that mean? Does that mean I should tie my foot to a chair? Does it mean that I have to tie my shoelaces together so that I don't walk anywhere? What does that mean? Well, the Mishnah and the Talmud, our oral tradition, teach us that what that really means is that you can't travel further than a certain distance. That is indicated in the Mishnah and the Talmud. Excuse me. So this is what I mean by we need the Mishnah and the Talmud to truly understand how to observe Jewish law. We continue to interpret, we continue to try and understand, but our basis is in these 6 orders of the Mishnah and the 72 tractates of the Talmud. We have laws regarding Sabbath, we have laws regarding agriculture, we have laws regarding marriage contracts and other contracts. So all of these things are done so that we know specifically what each and every law really means in the Torah, and we can fully understand it and live a Jewish life without worrying about, oh, well, the Torah says this, what do we mean by that? Okay? So the concepts over the 700 years that were developed are all meant to help us live a life that is Jewish and that is healthy both mentally and physically, and gives us purpose and meaning, most importantly, to our lives. For a further discussion and further study of Talmud, Mishnah, and the oral law, find a rabbi and begin studying. That's the way we begin the first step. Have a great day. Shalom.